Hello, bonjour, hello, hi, heya, and privyet hockey fans. Welcome back to the Europuck podcast, the show where two Brits talk all things European hockey as part of the Hockey Podcast Network. My name is Hayden, or Odd Man Rush, as you can see up there, and joining me, of course, once again, is the numbers man, Chris Gadsby. Hey, Chris.
Hello, yes, numbers man here and ready to do some math.
Wonderful.
As you call it.
Chris does the math, so I can just sit here and look pretty, so it's wonderful. But yeah, how are you doing today, Chris? You doing all right?
Yes, not too bad. I've had my thick socks on all day, though, because it's cold here. And I refuse to have the heating on in the day. So I sit there with cold feet.
So go for it.
Being in a village and being on an oil tank, we have a finite amount.
I see. Okay.
And when it's gone, we have to order more. And in wintertime, it's about 50 pence a litre.
Right.
And in summertime, it's about 20 pence a litre.
Okay.
Now, when you consider that you have a 2,500 litre tank, saving 30 pence a litre does come out at about 700, 800 quid.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, you've got to be smart, especially with all the lockdowns and all of the, financial struggles that the world is going through. Every little helps, right, Chris? Tesco would be proud of us,
Yeah, exactly. We're like, yay, we've got a vaccine. Coronavirus is like, haha, new strain.
Yeah, literally. But, so by the sounds of it, you're living like the university student lifestyle right now, like no heating whatsoever unless it gets desperate.
The heating's on now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the heating's on now. It starts at 5 o'clock in the evening, so.
Oh, that's not too bad then.
Otherwise I get moaned at when the boss comes home from work, so.
Yes, very true, very true. But anyway, enough about Chris's homeowner life. It's time to talk about some hockey, ladies and gentlemen. So some of you might remember at the end of last episode, we mentioned that this is our last Europuck podcast until the new year.
Proper, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the last Europuck podcast ever. Don't worry, folks. We're still here. It's just the network have been like, look, if you release your episodes on Fridays, which is obviously next week, next Friday is the 25th. We're recording this Tuesday, the 15th of December, by the way. So when this goes out, it will be, the 18th, I believe? Yes, the 18th. Yes. Then, obviously, a week after that is the 25th. It's Christmas, and we're not working on Christmas. Woo! Screw that. And then the week after that is New Year, and we're not working on New Year because screw that too. So yeah, so basically we're taking 2 weeks off because we deserve it, and you deserve 2 weeks.
You might get like a 2-minute Christmas message from us.
Maybe. We're not making any promises because then you guys will hold it to us, but we might pleasantly surprise you. See, we're going to keep your expectations low because that way if we don't do anything or we forget to do something, then you're not disappointed. But then if we do something, you're like, I'm pleasantly surprised. So, we've got quite a lot to talk about this episode.
Yes.
There's a few different leagues.
Tournament or something.
There's a very big tournament taking place on Christmas Day, next Friday, or starting Christmas Day. But we're going to take you through all the different stats from the leagues across Europe. There's a couple of leagues we're not going to touch on. I'll mention them now. The Finnish Liga, because they're still in the lockdown. They've still cancelled their matches up until another few days until they get back on.
Yeah, the 19th, they're supposed to come back.
Yeah, so basically, by the time this episode goes out, there still won't be any games on anyway. We're not going to talk about the DEL either, because, yes, they're technically starting tomorrow as we're recording this, but at the same time, there's not really enough to talk about. We don't have any games to talk about right now because we're recording it on the Tuesday the 15th, when they start on Wednesday the 16th. And then we're not going to talk about the French League Magnus, because they're very similar situation to the Finnish Liga. Thing. Yeah, so we basically got 8 leagues I think we've got to talk about around Europe, and then we've got a lot to talk about with the World Junior Championship. So let's talk about the KHL. So I've got the KHL standings up here. I will quickly take you through them. So in first place in the Western Conference, shock, it's CSKA Moscow, 59 points, 37 games played. I know, right? Tell me about it. Then in second place, you've got SK St. Petersburg topping their division, 51 points in 37 games played. Lokomotiv in third place with Dynamo Moscow and Dynamo Minsk in fourth and fifth. I don't believe those standings have changed at all since last week, but games have been played nonetheless. Then you've got Severstal Sharopovets, Spartak Moscow and Jokerit in the final playoff positions in the Western Conference, with Vityaz Podolsk, Sochi and Dynamo Riga outside of the playoff picture. Podolsk is only 2 points out of the playoff spots, but Jokerit has 5 games in hand on them and 5 games in hand on pretty much every other team in their conference. So I would expect them with only 1 point back from Spartak and 3 points back from Sharopovets and 4 points back from Dynamo Minsk. They're going to be sitting somewhere in the middle, at least, of the Western Conference playoff positions by the end of their run to get back into form. Then in the Eastern Conference, we've got Akbars Kazan very far ahead in the Eastern Conference. There's a 8-point difference between first and second in the Western Conference, and a 11-point difference between first and second in the East. So Akbars Kazan on at least a 5-game winning streak, 60 points in 39 games played. Avangard Omsk, 49 points in 35 games played. Then you've got Metallurg Magnitogorsk only 1 point behind. Traktor Chelyabinsk, 2 points behind them. Although Avangard Omsk in second have only played 35 games this season, it's important to mention. 4, 5, maybe 6 games in hand on some of the other teams. Salavat Yuleyev in 5th place. Avto Mobilis with only 35 games played in 6th place. Then you've got Torpedo in 7th place. Baris Astana, Barisna Sultan, whatever you want to call them. 32 games played, so similar to the Jokerit situation. I'd expect them to be competing with Yekaterinburg for the 6th seed once they've kind of caught up with their games. And then the 4 teams outside of the playoffs, to the surprise of pretty much nobody except for Sibir. Sibir Novosibirsk, Amur Khabarovsk, Kunlun Red Star, and Nefta Himik. So those are your standings for the KHL. Chris, give me your thoughts, bud.
For start, if we start in the Western Conference, you mentioned about Podolsk there as well. And so, yes, they're only 2 points back from Jokerit, and Jokerit have got a ton of games in hand. However, they're only 3 points back from Spartak Moscow in 7th. So it's not as though Jokerit are the team they've got to try and catch in order to get into the playoffs. Sochi and Riga doing the same as always. Akbars Kazan have been on a good run, as you said. They've won their last 5 games in a row in regulation. Sorry, mate, that's 6 games in a row in regulation. To really extend that gap at the top, as you said. Avangard Omsk, they were within kind of touching distance, but they've fallen away a bit now. 3 losses in the last 4 games has put them a bit on the back foot. Even if they win their 4 games in hand, they aren't going to catch Akbars Kazan at the top. Very exciting down towards the bottom, because Kunlun Red Star, who have picked up points in each of their last 5 games. Yes, okay, some of them have been overtime losses, but in each of their last 5 games, they've picked up some form of point, and they've been doing it against some decent teams in many respects as well. They managed to take CSK Moscow to overtime earlier on in the week. On the 1st of December. Then they took Nizhny Novgorod to overtime as well. A win against Nizhny Kamsk, who are now bottom, and a win against Sochi as well. And then they took Dynamo Minsk to penalties. So they've been on a decent run of form, and it's put them, nowhere near the playoffs, but not bottom anymore. And that's not somewhere that we've been used to seeing them, is not bottom of the Eastern Conference. So they'll be buoyed by their run of form. As I said, they're 13 points away from the playoffs, and the teams in the playoffs have Barisna Sultan, for example, have got 3 games in hand on them. So still incredibly unlikely and probably not going to happen. In fact, almost definitely not going to happen. But, they've taken one step on a very big mountain.
Absolutely. And I think given the fact that they had such a poor start to the season, pretty much through no fault of their own. Obviously you could make the argument, well, they were the players on the ice, they needed to get wins, but at the same time, they were missing a huge amount of their player base because they're foreign players. Because for those of you who aren't aware, Kunlun Red Star usually based in China. Obviously, China at the beginning of the season or in the earlier months of this year was the epicenter of the virus that's going around. So they moved Kunlun Red Star before the season began to Russia. And because they made that move to Russia, a load of their foreign players had to go through a different set of immigration rules, and it meant that their paperwork took a lot longer. So a lot of their foreign players, they're arguably the best players on their roster, former NHL players, decent hockey players in the pro circuit, they took like an extra month or 2 to actually make it onto the roster, and by that point, Kunlun were in the basement. So kind of it was a tough stretch for them, but now they've started to get their players together. I mean, they've got a former Stanley Cup champion and NHL star in Alexei Kovalev as their head coach now. So hopefully they'll manage to kind of get maybe closer to a playoff berth, maybe kind of finish the season on a strong note and kind of have some positivity going into the following 2021 season. But Chris, considering we're over halfway through this season, and usually at this point we can see, we can obviously see the teams that are very unlikely to make the playoffs, the teams that are likely going to top their division. We're seeing the teams that, are really stretching out in front of the competition, like Moscow and Akbars Kazan. Obviously, they're always the teams that we see at the top. But I've got to say, I think the fact that the hard salary cap came in this year, and there is that little extra bit of parity this year compared to other seasons in the KHL, it's making the middle table really exciting to watch. And kind of as we get deeper into the season and into the final weeks of the regular season before the playoffs hit, I think there's going to be some really intense matches to decide who plays where. What do you think?
I think there will, and I think, given when we get towards the end of January, we're going to be starting, particularly in the KHL, to look at the run-in for teams.
Yeah,
it comes around every single season. Does a team like Spartak Moscow, who are on the verge of making the playoffs or not, do they have to face Sochi, Kunlun, Riga, and Nizhny Kamsk, or are they facing CSKA, SKA, and all that sort of thing? So we're really going to start to look at that. It reminds me a lot of kind of like the midfield in Formula One at the moment, whereas you've got the teams at the top that always run away with it, but the midfield battle is really quite intense at the moment. And you look in the Western Conference, and you've got 6 points between 4th and 7th. In fact, it's only 7 points between 4th and 8th. In the Eastern Conference, we're talking 7 points between second and 6th. And there's still plenty around the bottom. It does tail off a bit towards the end. We're starting to see, potentially who is likely to make the playoffs. If you look in the East, eliminate Kunlun and Nizhny Kamsk already. Amur Khabarovs are starting to struggle as well. They're 5 points away from the playoffs, but Baris Nursultan have got games in hand. And then they're 8 points behind the team above them, Nizhny Novgorod. Relatively similar in the Western Conference, but it looks tighter because there's the one less team. Once you've eliminated Sochi and Riga, you're talking 8 teams out of 9 making that. But you look at Podolsk, they are only 3 points back from Spartak Moscow, who are only a further 2 points back from Sherepovets. So anything can still change in that. I think Jokerit, as you said, once they have their games in hand and they play their games in hand, they've got 5. Let's say they win 3 of them. That's another 6 points. 45, you're already up in 5th place. So you're looking kind of towards the bottom there. But one team, the team that misses out in the West, I think is going to feel quite hard done by because it is so close. The teams in the East, there is that bit more of a split that is starting to form, particularly if Baris Nursultan win their games in hand. Sibir, Novosibirsk are on a bad streak, lost the last 4 in a row. And if they're not careful, it's going to be a big mountain to climb towards the end of the season because whilst it's only 2 games at the moment, Novgorod have got a game in hand on them. If it's 3 games, you're starting then to rely on other teams slipping up, and it's not a nice place to be.
No, absolutely not. And I think given some of the form guides we've seen recently, I mean, Sherepovets, give them credit, they're on a 5-game winning streak. Yeah, a couple of them have taken overtime or shootouts, but 5 straight wins is keeping them in that race. And Sherepovets, Severstal, they're a team that you always expect them to be more towards the 8th, 9th seed. So the fact they're sitting in 6th at this point in the season, they're only 1 point back from 5th as well. They're still very competitive this year. So they've obviously put a roster together that is getting the job done. And then on the flip side, Yekaterinburg and Salavat, they've both won one of their last 5 games too. So, we're starting to see some of the teams that started off the season really well kind of drop off a little bit. Is it an indication of what's to come? Is it just a bit of a blip in the radar? I guess we'll have to find out as the next few weeks go ahead. So,
yeah, I mean, what you've got to remember with the KHL is that unlike the rest of Europe, the KHL follows the NHL scoring system.
Yes.
Which means that the 2 overtime wins that are on the screen there for Sherepovets are as much value as the regular time wins with the 2 points. Obviously, in the rest of Europe, an overtime win being 2 rather than 3, there's that more incentive to take it in regulation. But there, they've won their last 5 and they've got, 10 points from the last 5 games and you can't do any better than that.
No, quite literally. So those were the KHL standings. We'll obviously keep you up to date with them. It's going to be very interesting to see how the KHL matches up. I know that they might be going on a bit of a break over Christmas as well, because they have a couple of championships, like they have the Challenge 1 Cup, I think, or something like that. They've been announcing loads of international rosters. Finland have put a team together. I think Russia have put a team together. They have a couple of kind of Christmas winter holiday tournaments that take place. So whether the KHL will have many games.
There's only a few teams play. Well, there's only 1 match on Christmas Day.
Okay.
But there's 6 on New Year's Eve and 8 on Boxing Day. So it's still fairly full schedule.
Okay, fair enough. I believe there was because I've been seeing them all through, so I would imagine it's a case of a few players here or there will be taken out of the lineup to go play internationally, whereas the rest of the teams will keep playing business as usual. So anyway, that was the KHL. Let's move on to the Swedish Hockey League, shall we, folks? So about 21 to 24 games through the season. We've got Skellefteå that's played 26 games, but other than that, every other team has pretty much played 21, 22, 23 games. So once again, Rögle BK, back up in the top, we're still in the top. 3 points ahead of Frölunda, and they've played 3 less games played. They've won 4 of their last 5 games. They are playing pretty well for themselves. Then the aforementioned Frölunda in second place. Same amount of games as third place Växjö, but 1 more point. So there really is still that race for first place in the SHL. That's going to be exciting for the next few weeks and months. Åbro in fourth place, 42 points in 22 games played. So they're very much in the race as well. It's a 4-horse race for the top position. Then Luleå, 39 points in 21 games played. You could argue that they're still in the race also, with the fact that they've got 3 games in hand on some of the other teams above them. Skellefteå, 37 points in 26 games, kind of put themselves in a position to be in the round of 8 or the quarterfinals, depending on how the other teams fare. Then you got Färjestad, 36 points, 23 games. Leksands, Djurgården, and HV71, all sitting in the round of 8 finals. Then the 2 teams that are neither in the playoffs nor the playouts, you've got Oskarshamn and Linkopings. And, Oskarshamn, 5 straight losses, not particularly a very good run for them recently. 9 straight losses. Oh, geez. Yeah, because we mentioned it last week, didn't we? Oh, yikes.
Yeah, we did. It is very much like that. And as you said, well, actually finish the teams before I jump in.
Okay, sure. And then just to finish off, Malmö and Brynäs. Malmö, they have got 2 wins in their last 5 games, so they're 3 games back from Linköpings, but they're only 3 points back also. And then Brynäs IF, not a very good season for them, 16 points in 18 games played. To be fair, they have got at least 3 games, as many as 8 games in hand on some of these other teams. So does that mean that they're kind of on the outside looking in with the chance to make an impact and make a difference there? I mean, given the fact that they're in last place by 5 points already, there's very much an uphill battle to climb. But Chris, what did you want to say? Go for it.
I was going to jump in saying Oskarshamn have lost 9 straight, as we've said. That just keeps growing week to week, really. I sometimes get a little bit... I forget sometimes that these 5, the form guide isn't from the last time we did the podcast. But from the last time we recorded, you look at Rögle, they've got another 2. They've pulled away from Frölunda because Frölunda had that loss against Malmö. Surprise loss, really, against Malmö by 3 goals to 2. Rögle are the only team that are really going for it. Brynäs, the team at the bottom that I want to mention, they haven't played for 10 days now. And they have a couple more postponements. One today, which is postponed, and then one on Thursday, which is also postponed, although they should apparently be back in action on Saturday. So they've, when you have postponements like that and nobody else does, it's pretty clear what the reason is. So, as you said, the top, they're really starting to form. I would keep Luleå in there as well, because if they win the game in hand, they've got over Örebro. They're on 42 points, so they're definitely there. And Skellefteå kind of really, they could easily drop, because when you consider that Desjardins are 5 points behind, 5 games in hand. Färjestad are 1 point behind with 3 games in hand. Leksands are 3 points behind, 3 games in hand. All it takes is 1 win in those points and they jump above them. So Skellefteå, I think, if you look at kind of a point per game average, they're probably closer down to around 9th, 10th spot. So it's very much kind of becoming, I would say, kind of like a top 5, particularly if they win those games in hand. So we'll see how that pans out over the next few weeks and around Christmas. But yeah, I think what's going to be really key and clear is that when we come back after our little Christmas break, these tables, I think, could look a lot different. Yeah,
it's literally what I was about to say. I mean, given the fact that, the last couple of weeks, I think it's the last 3 straight episodes, we've looked at the standings and the scores, and we obviously started the whole podcast series and season 1 of the Europoke podcast by doing so. Then obviously we had a load of guests come in, so when we came back, like in the odd episode in between when we didn't have guests, there'd been a noticeable change in the standings, and we weren't aware of some of the streaks that were going on, and we were looking at it from the outside in, as opposed to now we're kind of looking at it from the inside out, if you know what I mean. So yeah,
well, I think if you look at, I've just got Rögle's fixtures up, for example. Between us recording now and us recording our next episode, like our next proper episode like this in January, they're playing 7 or 8 games.
Yeah.
They could win them all and be way out in front, or they could lose them all and all of a sudden be in 5th.
Yeah, it's very true. So it's going to be, well, same with the KHL, less so with the SHL in the sense that, there's still several teams competing for the top spot in the league, whereas in the KHL, Akbars Kazan and Moscow are very much set in stone at the top, especially given the fact that it's 2 points for a win, 1 point for an overtime loss, and then nothing else. So, yeah, the SHL, still plenty of movement that could take place. Lots of teams with games in hand because they've struggled a fair bit with the virus that's going around. So we'll have to see how they do over the next few weeks, and we'll get back to you in early January with how they do. So we're not going to talk about the Finnish Liga like I mentioned, so let's move on to the Swiss National League, which, very similar to the SHL, about half a dozen less games played for most of the teams in the league, but still plenty to play for a lot of these teams. So Lausanne currently sitting in first place, 31 points in 14 games played, so they've done pretty well for themselves, given they've got at least 3 games in hand on second place, a couple of games in hand on some of the other teams. Fribourg Gotteron, they have 31 points also, but 3 more games played, so I would expect them to maybe drop a little bit, given the fact that Zurich, Zug both have at least 2 games in hand. Lugano have got 5 games in hand on them. They're actually one of the teams that's played the most amount of games so far this season, so they put themselves in a pretty good position, but given the fact they've only won 2 of their last 3, got points in 3 of their last 5, then, it's gonna, I would imagine them not to be sitting in second place by the next time we talk about them. Zurich with a 5-game winning streak, 29 points, 15 games played, so they're still very much up there. Very much competing with Lausanne still, because they're only 2 points back with 1 more game played, so all it takes is for a win or a loss to go one way or the other to increase or close in that gap. Then Zug, like I mentioned, Geneva Servette and Lugano, 28, 27 and 20 points, so very much a top 5 forming here. Lugano kind of taking the final playoff spot, or the final round, quarterfinal playoff spot, although HC Ambri Piotr is very close there, but they've played 5 more games than Lugano, so very much the fact that the virus had such a big impact on the schedule for the Swiss National League has kind of thrown everything up in the air. Nothing's really set in stone yet, I think would be the best way to describe it. Then you've got the Rapperswil-Jona Lakers, 5 straight losses on the season, 18 points in 17 games. HC Davos have managed to climb their way up a little bit. They've got 16 points in 14 games. They've been sitting in the relegation group for most of the year, but they've got 2 wins in their last 5 games, which isn't really that great, but they've managed to get themselves only 2 points back from the 8th seed, so they must be doing something right. Then HC Biel, BLBN, they have 15 points in 13 games to take the final playoff spot. Then SC Bern of all teams, 15 points in 15 games played. Then the Langau Tigers, as we would expect, 14 points in 14 games. So, yeah, there's still a lot of movement going on in the Swiss National League. I'm quite surprised Davos has jumped up so high and Bern's sitting so low. And there's very much a 5-horse race for first place at the moment, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I'll gloss over the National League for the big reason that since we recorded last week, there's only been 5 games in the whole league.
Right.
Which is why, I mean, the standings are very similar to what they were last week when we spoke. Davos, as you said, they've won last one in the last week. Bern have, really quite struggled to pick results up. Fribourg got themselves the 2 wins in the last week to jump themselves up to second. Yes, they've played more games. Lugano have been hit with a lot of postponements. They're still postponed for their game, which is actually meant to be today, and it's been postponed. And then Genevieve Servette as well has had a couple of games postponed. Their one today and their one on Friday as this comes out. So teams are kind of getting hit individually. I think it's always going to be a bit like that this year. I think we're going to have a lot of kind of difficulty really in kind of keeping the games even. I think there's going to be a lot of catching up to do towards the back end of the seasons.
Yeah, especially with the Swiss National League, that seems to have been hit worse than a lot of the other leagues, and it's kind of had to backtrack a lot of their games compared to some of the other leagues in Europe. But also, it's important to mention HC Davos. They've recently lost their third-time player, Joe Thornton, obviously Jumbo Joe, NHL legend. He obviously joined the team while waiting for the NHL season to begin. We've been given the supposed start date of January 13th. So Joe Thornton's like, right, see you guys, I'm going to go spend Christmas back in North America. So he's gone back. Will that affect Davos's performance, considering he was pretty much a point-per-game player, if not higher? That remains to be seen. But yeah, so Swiss National League still dealing with a lot of issues in terms of the virus and postponements. So hopefully in a couple of weeks we should be able to update you and some more games have been played, but don't hold your breath, folks. So we're not going to talk about the German DEL because like I said at the beginning of the video, once again, they haven't played any games at the time of this recording, although they will have by the time this goes out. Let's look at the Czech Extraliga, shall we? So, in first place, 50 points already in 19 games played, Trinec. Pretty good start for them, I would say. Then HC Plzeň and Sparta Prague in second and third place, 43 and 44 points respectively, and only one game between them. But Oceleri Trinec have played 19 games, which is tied the least amount in the league so far. So they've really put themselves up in front. It's basically their league to lose at this point now. Then Karlovy Vary currently sitting in fourth place, 40 points in 20 games. They finish off the quarterfinal positions. Then you've got Mlada Boleslav, Mountfield HK, Liberec, Vitkovice. Basically, from Liberec to Vitkovice, there's a 7-point difference. From Liberec to Mountfield, there's an 8-point difference. So, very similar to what we said last week. There's Trinec at the top, Plzeň, Sparta Prague, and Karlovy Vary in their own little league. Then you've got Mlada Boleslav and Mountfield in their own little league. Then you've got Liberec sitting there by themselves. Then you've got Vitkovice with Pardubice, Olomouc, Litvinov, and Kometa Brno in their own little league as well. And then you've got Zlin, which is pretty much in there as well. And then Cesk Budějovic, who really aren't playing very well this year. 13 points in 20 games. So, very much, it's Trinec's league to lose at this point in the season. Plzeň and Sparta Prague have the chance to compete for the second spot, maybe even jump up if they're lucky, as with Karlovy Vary. Then Mlada Boleslav can kind of compete for that spot as well. Mountfield, yeah, they're also in the race as well. Liberec just kind of sitting there by themselves, just need to keep pace and they'll be fine. And then the rest of the teams that are in the playoffs, and Zlin, who are kind of in the race as well, kind of fighting for that extra playoff spot. Like you mentioned with the KHL, there's probably going to be one team out of that final kind of 8th seed to 13th seed that's going to be left very disappointed at the end of the year because they're going to probably miss it by like a point or two. But Chris, what do you make of the Czech Extraliga so far?
Yes, so they've actually got a full program going on as we speak.
Good.
As well. Trinec, living up to their name, they're 5-0 up at the moment against Vitkovice.
Oh, wow.
So they're extending their lead. Well, their lead's staying the same at the moment at 7 points, but of course they've still got the 3 games in hand.
Yes.
Just looking at their table, and I may be wrong without obviously looking at it in massive detail, but they're on a 20-game, as it stands, 20-game point streak. They are yet to lose in regulation this season, and they are probably the only team in Europe that haven't lost in regulation yet this season.
I think there's 1 or 2. I'm not sure if Rögle have lost in regulation yet, have they?
I might have done. I'll go and a glance around some of the leagues, but definitely there's something like that. So, they're killing it up at the top, and I think you covered everything pretty much. Well, it's towards the bottom of those playoffs again, as you've said. Take Cesk Budějovic out of it, and you've got like 5 teams going for 4 spaces at the bottom.
Yeah, it's also interesting that kind of looking at some of the streaks that they're going on. Kometa Brno sitting in the final playoff spot. They've lost 4 straight games. So if Zlin picks up a couple of wins here and there, they might be able to kind of leapfrog over into that spot. You've got Sparta Prague that have won their last 4 straight games. That's really helped put them in the 3rd seed and kind of keep them competitive. Vitkovice, they're losing at the moment. If they do lose, they would have lost 5 of their last 6 games. I mean, a 5-0 deficit is kind of difficult to come back from, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. And then Litvinov, they're playing relatively well. There's a lot of teams that are very much 500. Interesting about Trinec, though, they have lost 2 games in their last 5, but they've both been overtime or shootout losses. So even though they're dropping games, they're still managing to take points from them, and that's why they're so high up in the top of the league, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it is. I'm having a quick look through all the leagues, and from what I can make out in the leagues that we cover, they're the only team not to have lost in regulation this season. So, yeah, really quite incredible. With Trinec, as I said, they're 5-0 up at the end of the second period in their game. It's going on this evening. But, yeah, it's... they've got 85 goals in 20 games. They're averaging 4 goals a game.
Wow.
And conceding 2 a game. So they're winning every game on average 4-2.
Well, they've got that insurance marker.
That's always a good score line to be winning each game with. But I think the thing that strikes me with the Extra League is, yes, you've kind of got the green at the top, red at the bottom divide over the last 5 games, but it is very sporadic. There's no one. You look at some of the other leagues, and you've got the teams at the bottom that are just blanket red, and the teams at the top that are blanket green. Here, it's very much kind of, no one's really going on a massive streak. Sparta Prague are on 4-game winning streak, maybe becoming 5 tonight if they can hold on to their 2-1 lead they've got at the moment. But nobody is really doing terribly. They're not. Yeah. No one's going on like a 11-game losing streak. No one's on a 10-game winning streak and being fantastic. Even as you said, I mean, if you consider that a couple of games ago, Trinek, 4 games ago, they would have been 14-1, 1-0.
Yeah.
And then you're like, right, okay. But as you said, even when they're losing games, and they lost to Maslav Bolasev, and in fact, actually, they lost to Cesc Bujovic down at the bottom.
Oh my!
In overtime, but Cesc's only overtime victory is coming against Trinek. But I think from my point of view, anyway, even at this early stage. I mean, it's probably not even that early, really. We're nearly the midway point there as well. It is Trinek's to lose.
Absolutely. I think 2 things. Isn't that just how sports goes? The Trinek is so sitting up in front. They get an overtime loss to the last seeded team that are 5 points back from any other team in the league. That's just like sums up sports as it is. But also the fact that I believe, I'm not sure if that's the same this year because of the current global situation, having to postpone things, for example. But I'm pretty sure the standard Czech Extraliga season is 51 games long. So if Trinek keep this non-regulation loss streak up, or pointless or point streak up for the next kind of half a dozen games, we could see them not lose a single game in regulation for half of a season in the Czech Extraliga. How incredible would that be?
Yeah, it would be. It would be something. I mean, are they going to keep it? I mean, the logic kind of dictates that they will lose a game at some point.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, but not so much in the Czech League, but in the KHL, the SHL, the Liga when it comes back in this, and I know we'll get onto this in a moment, how the teams react to losing players to go to the World Junior Championship.
Yes, and also when the NHL starts up, there's a lot of prospects playing over in Europe as well. So
there's that as well.
How's that going to affect? Obviously, we mentioned Joe Thornton in the Swiss league. We've got, I know there's a couple of there's a Detroit Red Wings prospect. I can't remember his name. Philip Zadina that's playing for Trinek as well. Like I'm not sure how well he's playing. Could you bring up his stats for me, Chris, just quickly?
Yeah.
Philip Zadina. I just want to see like how well he's been playing. Like if he's been a catalyst for his team's success, then obviously him going might have a bit of an impact. And I've seen a couple of tweets recently from the KHL side, Jokerit. They've Eli Tolvanen has gone from the team, and obviously Mikko Lehtonen's gone from the team because the NHL season's starting back up. North American hockey's kicking back up again. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be missing out on potentially some of their key players for the year. And I would imagine from the management perspective, let's just hope that they made the most of their time that they had them, because otherwise, their job hasn't necessarily got any easier. It's certainly got easier for some of the teams towards the bottom of the standings that have had to face NHL talent every night. But those teams that have kept on to them for the last few months, it's going to be a little bit difficult to kind of keep that momentum, you know?
Yeah, Zadina, 14 points in 17 games.
So yeah, almost a point per game performance. Like, he's a big reason as to why the team's playing so well. But regardless, that's the Czech Extraliga. Let's move on to, we're now getting towards the sort of more minor European leagues. Let's move on to Ben Bounds' league in the Ice Hockey League, obviously the Austrian league. So, Bolzano in top place, 41 points, 17 games played. The Vienna Capitals taking second place with 39 points in 19 games. So, Bolzano, 2 games in hand, 2 points in hand. Isn't a huge amount if it was the same amount of games played, given, like Chris mentions every week, because I usually forget, the 3-point system in Europe. But the fact they've got 2 games in hand, they could really extend their lead. Then you've got Further AV19 in third place, Klagenfurt and Red Bull Salzburg taking the 4th and 5th positions. So you've pretty much got, I'd say you've pretty much got a 4-horse race at the moment. But then again, Salzburg, once again, it's interesting how the points can deceive you, because then they're 4 games in hand on 4th place, 6 games in hand on 3rd place, only 1 game in hand on 1st place though, so it is pretty much a 5-horse race, but I would throw in a few asterisks there, but it's really difficult to kind of make a judgment at this point whether it's a however many team horse race, because, you know, all the different teams have played different amounts of games, haven't they? Then you've got Innsbruck taking the first loser stage position, 30 points. The Graz 99ers not doing so well as of late. They've lost at least 5 straight games, points in one of... They've lost 8 straight games and points in
8 in a row.
8 losses straight and then 1 point in their last 5 games. They need Bouncy back, I'm telling you. Then,
I mean, you say... Yeah. No, finish the leagues and then I'll jump in.
Okay, sure. And then you've got Dornbirn, You've got Dornbirn 26 points, 19 games, Bratislava 23 points, Villach 19 points, then Steinbach 14 points. So basically, you've got the top 5 teams that are going at it. Then you've got Innsbruck and Graz, which it's an uphill battle to get them back into that race, especially given the fact that the team that they have got pretty similar games in hands with, they're already 5 points back. Salzburg has 5 games, I should say, in hand, though they're tied in points. So Salzburg really is the X factor at the moment within the Austrian league. It's going to dictate whether it's going to be a 7-team race towards the second half of the season, or whether it's going to be a 5-horse race. And then kind of everybody other below the Graz 99ers is kind of looking like they're pretty set in the loser stage, whether it be as the 8th seed or the 6th seed or the 10th seed. And then obviously Steinbach haven't really played very well. Got a win in their last 5 games though, but 14 points in 21 games played. They are not looking very good. So Chris, what were you going to say? Go for it.
I was going to jump in on the Graz 99ers, really. They've lost, 8 in a row now. And I was just having a look because it doesn't appear when you look at the fixtures like scoring the goals is their problem.
Right.
So since our last podcast, they lost by 6 goals to 4, 5 goals to 4, and 5 goals to 2.
Okay.
So, they are scoring the goals. So I was like, right, okay, well, let's have a look at the net minding. And so they've used 3 netminders so far this season. Obviously, Ben Bounds, who's only played 3 games, then got out injured. Then they've got Felix Nussbacher, who's played 6 games so far. He has a 3.16 goals against average and a .906 save percentage.
Well, that's not too bad then. Okay.
They're what I'm going to call starting netminder, Olivier Rodriguez, who has 15 games under his belt, so more than double Felix. He has a goals against average of 3.64 and a save percentage of .896.
Oh,
now,
okay,
I know
right.
Ben Bounds has got injured and played a lot less, but in the 3 games he had, his goals against average was 2.78 and a .910 save percentage. So he's the only one of the 3 netminders that Graz have who are averaging under 3 goals a game.
Yeah, so I'm telling you, Graz, once Bouncy gets healthy, put him in that net, because you're going to need him by the sounds of it. See, this is what we got him on the right time, because basically we can have the narrative, Chris, he's the saviour of the Graz 99ers this year, But anyway, so that's a look at the Austrian league. We've got a few more leagues to look at, 3 more leagues to be precise, and I'm curious of the time, so we should really crack on. So, let's take a look at the Danish league. Oh no, sorry, the Polish league, I should say, my bad. Polish league. And interestingly, we actually have 4 teams that have secured themselves a place in the playoffs already, Chris. We've got Jastrzębie with 57 points in 24 games, Tichy 55 points in 24 games. So once again, 2-horse race. Then you've got Torun and Katowice with 45 and 43 points respectively. Oswiecim, they pretty much need to get 1 more point and they've secured themselves a place in the playoffs. Podhale, very similar. And then Krakow, very similar also. So it's basically, we're not going to probably touch on this league too much until the end of the season. After maybe we'll touch on them next episode, but after that, there's not going to be a huge amount to talk about with the Polish league now, because it's basically going to be, can one of the teams with 6 points that have lost basically all of their games this season manage to catch up with Sanok, who have only won 1 of their last 5 games, but they have a 17-point lead on these teams, So it's very much like, okay, by the time we come back, practically every single playoff berth will be decided except for the 8th seed. So there's not really going to be much that we need to talk about with this league, is there, Chris?
No, I mean, so they're having quite a break over Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Jastrzębie, for example. They don't play again until the 5th.
Okay.
So it's going to be pretty much as we were when we come back after our Christmas break. But the thing I'm looking at is the reason that these teams have secured playoff berths already is because the other 2 are so bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a league to gloss over because there's like 1 game a week and nothing's really changed. But they've only got 12 games left in their regular season.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so there's a maximum of 36 points on offer. If Zagrebie were to win every single game, that would give them 42 and they wouldn't catch the teams at the top. So, by the time that we get to the next game, Unai Oswiecim, MMKS Podhale, they're probably going to be secured as well. And then a game after that, Krakow will be secure. Sanok, I mean, they're still going to be in the playoffs with about 5-6 games to go.
Yeah.
We just know already that it's likely, they're going to take the 8th seed and then it will be, at the moment, Jastrzębie against Sanok in the playoffs first round.
Oh, that's going to be a tough one for Sanok, isn't it?
We said this weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
So whoever comes in 8th they're going to come up against the team in first and they're going to lose.
That said, the 7th seed is going to have to come up against Tichy, and they're not that far behind either. So it's going to be the 7th and the 8th seed are really going to have an uphill battle in the first round of the playoffs.
It's those middle ones.
Yeah.
It's 3rd versus 6th and 4th versus 5th, where over the course of the regular season, they're separated by less than a game.
Yeah, and that they're just going to make the most exciting first rounds, to be honest, aren't they? Penultimately for this week, because we're not looking at the French League Magnus, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have the Danish Metaligaen. So once again, the league with the 0.5 points. We love to see it, so let's crack on with these quickly. So the Aalborg Pirates in first place, 54 points in 24 games played. 52.5 points for Rungsted, so two teams very much trying to chase it at the top. Esbjerg Energy, 2 games in hand, 48.5 points, so you could put them up there as well. Then after that is very much race for 4th place, as the Herning Blue Fox have 39.5 points, with 3 more games played than Esbjerg. Then Frederikshavn, 36.5 points in 24 games. Sondersjijk, 30 points in 23 games played. Herlev and the Mighty Bulls take the final 2 playoff berths with 26.5 and 21.5 points. And then the Odense Bulldogs, 15 points in 26 games played. They won their most recent game, but there's a couple of teams. I mean, Blue Fox and Frederikshavn have won 4 of their last 5 games each. Sondersjijk on a 5-game losing streak. It's a wonder they're still sitting in 6th place, to be perfectly honest. 6-game losing streak. Wow. So it's no wonder. I mean, it just goes to show how far behind Herlev and the Mighty Bulls have been, that Sondersjijk are still there, and given the fact that they haven't necessarily played too well themselves either. But once again, I mean, the kind of teams that we were expecting to be at the top at the beginning of the season when we kind of previewed this league are kind of sitting up there, really, aren't they, Chris?
Yeah, so, I mean, you look at Aalborg again, they're doing really well. They've scored 5 goals in each of the last 3 games.
Oh, wow.
2 of those, in fact, their most 2 recent games were 5-0 shutouts, so
wow.
they've really been going for it recently. Again, in the Danish league, you can really see that green-red split that I've been talking about, top and bottom. It very much feels like it's an us and them. You look even closer into it, you feel it's a top 3, potentially middle 3, but you could argue it's getting towards middle 2 now. And then the rest with Odense just off the bottom. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks, but we'll see what happens. But I think it is very much becoming kind of an us and them split now. Very
much is. So that's the Danish Metal League, and finally for the standings this week we have the Norwegian Fjordkraft Ligaen. So Frisk Asker very high in front. Points in their last 5 games, only 1 loss in the last 5 also. 46 points in 18 games, so they're very much out in front. Storhammer with 38 points in 18 games. Valerenga, 36 points in 17. Lillehammer, 32 in 18. Stavanger Oilers, 31 in 18. Sturgeon or Stjernen, 25 points in 19 games. So very much, you got Frisk Asker at the top, and then it's 2nd to 5th, kind of battling it out for position at the end of the year. And then 6th place, Sturgeon is kind of in a league of their own at the moment. Although that said, Mangelrud, 19 points, only 6 points back with 3 games in hand, so get 3 regulation wins, and they're right back up there with them. Sparta Sarpsborg, once again, still the team with games in hand compared to the rest of the league, but they're still with a playoff berth. Got 3 points behind Mangelrud, and they've got 4 games in hand on them, and they've got 8 or 9 games in hand on some of the other teams in the league already this season, so they just need to have a decent run. They've won 3 of their last 5 games, 2 of them be it in overtime or shootouts, but still wins nonetheless. Then you've got Gruner, 5 game loss streak at least, and then Narvik, they've won 1 of their last 5, and that took overtime or shootout. 7 points and 5 points. So you've still got, we're over a dozen games through the Norwegian league, and 2 teams are still in single-digit figures. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting league, and I would imagine, provided there are still games that are played when we take our Christmas break, there's going to be a bit of movement with this league, but nothing particularly crazy, is there, Chris?
No, Gruner 8-game losing streak, and they're losing at the moment, so that could easily go to 9. The team to look out for at the moment, Sparta Sarpsborg, they're 2-0 up at the moment, and they've played far fewer games than anybody else. They could easily start to jump up and get towards Stjernen. And I mean, that's kind of all to say, really. We know that Gruner and Narvik are only in the league because there wasn't the relegation last year. And it looks like they're not doing any better this year. And it's very much kind of Frisk Asker up at the top, all on their own. And then that tight midfield battle, as we've spoken about in other leagues as well.
Pretty much. We're obviously starting to see a trend here. That's just the way that sports standings go, pretty much, isn't it? There's usually teams at the top. Yep. You never usually get with a lot of these leagues that there's several different teams battling for first. It would make it more exciting, but the hockey gods obviously disagree and they like a little bit more structure to their time. So that is the final league that we're looking at. Once again, no French league this week because they still haven't played. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 leagues that we've looked at. And we are already, 45 minutes into this recording. That's wonderful. So, let's move quickly on to the predictions for this week, Chris.
Yep.
I will bring up the games that are on offer. Once again, Chris tweets it out on our Europuck podcast page. If you want to join, just give the results of the games for the results that you think. Obviously, this week is gone, but you can get ready for next week. 1 point for the correct winner of each game, 3 points for the perfect score, and it's just for fun, guys. So let's just have a good time with it. So the Monday game, Yokrit versus Akbars Kazan, already played at the time of this recording. Then Olomouc versus Kometa Brno. Then Mangelrud against Lillehammer. Kolna High against Dusseldorf. So we've got some DL games in there finally, folks. Valacha SV versus Red Bull Salzburg, HC Davos versus Geneva Servette, Adler Mannheim against the Nürnberg Ice Tigers, Oskarshamn against Luleå, the Aalborg Pirates against Herning Blue Fox, and then last but certainly not least, the Vienna Capitals against HC Bolzano. So, Chris, do you want to just update us with the latest scores in the predictions and who won and who's leading?
Yeah, it's been all changed.
Oh.
All changed. So last week it was another victory. I think it was second victory. I think it was for Prague Hockey Freak, who got 9 points. He went on quite a bit of a run at the end. Actually, he was a long way off with after the first 3 games. So by Wednesday, he only had 1 point, but then got the result of every single game right, with the correct winner and 1 perfect result. For the rest of the week to give himself 9 points in total. And that means that in the rolling tally, he takes the lead. 2 points clear, 37 points in total, 2 points clear of Henrique and a further point clear of Stash. So 37 points of Prague Hockey Freak. He holds a 2-point lead. Now, the predictions for next week, that's week beginning the 20th? 21st?
Yes, 21st, yep.
Are going to be slightly different because we're not doing a game a day as we normally do. We're going to do a big predictions for the World Junior Championship, which we'll come on to right now.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Chris, because I want to bring up the stat or the thing that you made. The graphic is on the screen now. Hooray! So the World Junior Championships predictions. So, I mean, that's a pretty decent segue for us to move into the World Junior Championships and discussing it. So
there is method in this madness.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it. Like, we might come across that we're just kind of doing it on the fly, but boom, here we are. Pre-planned stuff. Lovely. Thank you very much, Chris, for the wonderful graphic. I must admit, I am a big fan of the graphics you make. It makes my life so much easier when you're like, I've made this wonderful, lovely graphic that you can just shove on our social media and like, perfect, here you go. Enjoy, everyone. It's Chris's work. I'm just here to look pretty. So the interesting thing
I'm the
about
creative
this
one.
Exactly. So the interesting thing about this, folks, is this episode goes out on the 18th. And within the next week or so, obviously when our next episode will be released, is Christmas Day. And on Christmas Day is when the World Junior Championship starts. So we're going to take you through all of the different teams in the World Junior Championships this year. The 2020, it's still the 2020 World Junior Championships, although it goes into 2021.
It's called the 2021 World Championships because the medals were awarded in 2021.
See, that makes sense, but then like the common sense in me is like, well, then just start it in 2021 then. Like, just make it common sense.
Last year's were the 2020 ones. Well, sorry, this year's World Championships are the 2020 ones. These are technically next year's, even though they start this year.
You see how confusing it sounds, Chris? This is why the IHF
it gets better
need to
when
hire
you work
me.
out the quarterfinals and stuff in this.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, to be honest, like, the IHF should just hire me. I'd make it a lot easier for them. So, Chris, do you want to just take us through what the schedule and what the layout of the tournament is like? I've got the prediction image on the screen so they can see the layout.
Okay.
Do you want to just take us through it?
Yes. So it is split. There's 10 teams taking part, as you can see on the screen.
Yes.
And they are split into 2 groups of 5, Group A and Group B. And to start with, you have a round robin. Everybody plays everybody else once. So at the end of the group stage, you get, everyone's played 4 games. So the top 4 in each group go into the quarterfinals.
Okay.
Usually, but not this year, the teams at the bottom of each group have the relegation battle, and it's a a series of 3 games. Whoever gets the most points stays up.
Right.
This year, because like Division 1A and everything, that's all cancelled, there's no relegation.
Fair enough.
So at the end of the round robin, the top 4 go through into the quarterfinals. Okay. And the best team in Group A plays the 4th place team in Group B. Second in Group A plays 3rd in Group B, and so on. Now, on the screen, you'll see that because of TV coverage and for optimal audience, Team Canada, who of course it's being held in Edmonton, must play in quarterfinal 3, which starts at 5 p.m. local time on the day that it starts.
Right.
Can't remember exactly when it is, but on the day that it starts, on the 2nd of January.
Okay.
Which is midnight our time. Yay!
Hey!
So they must play in quarterfinal 3. I don't yet know where the rest of the quarterfinals are going to be. Originally, I thought it mattered. Then when I did a bit more research, I realised that it doesn't.
Okay.
Should Canada qualify out of quarterfinal 3, they go into semi-final 1, which is at 4 o'clock on the 4th of January, local time. Again, I think that's for optimum audiences.
Yeah.
Or to give a maximum time before the final, I think, actually. They're trying to favour Canada a bit.
Oh, really? What? The International Ice Hockey Federation is favouring A, the host nation, and B, one of the teams that wins it every... I mean, fair credit to Canada, they are a stacked roster most years, but, you know.
So, what happens after the quarterfinals is that the teams get reseeded.
Right.
And the highest ranked team left in the competition comes up against the lowest ranked team left in the competition.
Okay, fair.
So let's say, for example, that all the teams in Group A win their quarterfinals. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
In the semi-finals, first would play 4th and second would play 3rd.
Got it.
Well, obviously, it works very similar across groups. It's done on seeding and then on the number of points. It will all obviously fall into place quite nicely once we do it, but it's really hard to explain it when you say, well, this could happen and this could happen. And if 2 teams get 6, it's much easier once the group stages are done.
To be honest, once you get to the quarterfinal stage, it just becomes, we need to beat our opponent, you know?
Yes. Win or go home.
Yeah, pretty much.
So the semi-finals, obviously in semi-final 1, I know it's going to be quarterfinal 3. This, by the way, is all on the basis that Canada qualify.
Right.
And if
okay.
Canada come out of the group, then the quarterfinals could be anything.
Okay.
But I highly doubt that Canada are going to come bottom of their group.
I wouldn't think so.
And then obviously bronze and gold medal games are kind of self-explanatory.
Indeed. So do you want to just rattle off the 10 nations in each of the 2 groups? That would be very helpful. I've got them up on the screen, obviously, but just to make sure we know who's in which group.
Just in case your flag's knowledge isn't quite there. So Group A, we have Switzerland, Slovakia, Germany, Finland, and Canada. Group B, we have USA, Russia, Sweden, Czech Republic, and Austria.
Okay, perfect. So just sum that all up before we look at the rosters of each of the teams. We're not going to go really into detail with each of the rosters, but we wanted to make sure we talked about them. Just before we go into that, so essentially, just the TLDR, in the group stage, you play each of the other teams in your group once. If you play well enough, and you're one of the top 4 of the 5 teams in your group, you go through to the next round, and then essentially, from a fan perspective, just make sure your team wins. And then if you keep winning, you win the gold medal. Problem solved. But yeah, so we wanted to make sure... We wanted to look through the rosters of each of the teams. Now, we're going to go through the Canadian and American rosters as well. However, that said, I do want to make it known that we're going to focus primarily on the European rosters. Because, you know, the Europuck podcast, and basically every single Canadian and American outlet is talking about the Canadian American rosters because they've had nothing else to talk about for the last 3 months.
To put it into perspective, I've written about a paragraph on each of the European teams and about 3 or 4 lines on Canada and America. So
okay, wonderful. So I think the way that we should do this, Chris, I'll just run through each of the rosters one by one, take out some notable names, and then you can just give your little summary as to what you think about the teams. Does that sound good?
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So we'll start with Team Canada. We'll get the 2 big ones out of the way in Canada and the US, and then we'll spend some time talking about the good old Europeans. So you've got guys like Dylan Garand, Taylor Gauthier, Devon Levy as the goaltenders. basically this roster is absolutely stacked with
it is, yeah.
former first-round picks, upcoming first-round picks. We've got Kirby Dack, obviously, who's currently in the NHL. We've got players that are soon going to be in the NHL. I mean, you've got a defensive core: Justin Barron, Bowen Byron, Jamie Drysdale, Caden Gooley, Thomas Harley, Caden Korzak, Braden Schneider, and Jordan Spence, who are basically... Oh, Jordan Spence, interestingly, he was born in Sydney, but he's a Canadian as well. So basically a stacked roster. I don't really know what else to put there. And then you've obviously got recent second overall draft pick, Quinton Byfield. You've got the third overall draft pick from last year, Kirby Dack. You've got Dylan Cousins, Dylan Holloway, Peyton Krebs, Connor McMichael, Dawson Mercer, Alex Newhook, Jacob Peltier, Cole Perfetti, obviously for the Montreal Canadiens, Jack Quinn, Ryan Suzuki, Philip Tomasino, and Connor Zary. Basically, if this team doesn't make the gold medal game, I would be very surprised because they are a stacked roster, aren't they, Chris?
Yeah. So as you were saying, everybody in that side, apart from the netminder Tyler Gauthier, who's eligible next year, has been selected in the draft. Yeah. And they're all, obviously, other than Kirby Dack, they're playing for the kind of the affiliates in the OHL and the junior system. As you mentioned, extremely strong side. Second overall pick, Quinton Byfield. Sixth pick, Jamie Drysdale. Eighth pick, Jack Quinn. Canada have never failed to get out of the group stage since 1998.
Wow.
And I have kind of put my tuppence worth in with my predictions, and I do have Canada in the gold medal game.
Yeah, I've got to be perfectly honest. And this is also mentioning the fact that they had to release a load of players from their camp. Whether they would have made the final roster or not remains to be seen, and we'll never know. But they had to release a load of their players from their roster because, obviously, with the COVID situation. So even though they've had to release so many different players that may or may not have made the roster, they still have a stacked team. So, oh my God, Canada, I mean... You're the host nation. If you don't get to the final, I might have to sit here and laugh at you. Come on, we're expecting it here, folks. So then let's move on to America. Where did I put America? I put them here somewhere. Here they are. At the bottom. USA.
Oh, yeah, you got it
I
all
think
open
so.
on tabs.
Yeah, I've got open on tabs on Elite Prospects because Chris kindly reminded me that Elite Prospects had all the rosters because they were obviously released recently.
Yeah, and then I realised that the NHL website does as well.
Oh, perfect. But I mean, we love Elite Prospects here. They're very helpful. So. Once again, a pretty strong team here for the I mentioned Cole Perfetti as a Montreal Canadiens pick. He was, and that's Cole Caulfield I'm thinking of. Perfetti was a Winnipeg Jets recent draft pick, wasn't he? Something like that. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. I'll talk about Team USA. So Spencer Knight, Logan Stein, and Dustin Wolf are the three netminders, all 19 years old. So I've got to be perfectly honest, I don't know who's going to be the starter. I don't really pay a huge amount of attention to the North American World Junior teams. We don't have a team in the competition, so I'm just kind of here as a guy to watch on the periphery and just enjoy the hockey, because I've missed it. So the defensemen, you've got Brock Faber, Drew Hellison, Ryan Johnson, Tyler Clevin, Jackson Lacombe, Jake Sanderson, who is a very high pick, Hunter Skinner, Henry Thrun, and Cameron York as the defense. So not necessarily as much name recognition on the blue line this year compared to other years for Team USA. And for the forwards, they have Matthew Berniers, Brett Berard, Matthew Boldy, Bobby Brink, Brendan Brisson, Cole Caulfield, the Montreal Canadiens pick, there you go, Sam Colangelo, John Faranici, Arthur Kaliev, which is he was born in Uzbekistan, I think, right, interesting, Patrick Moynihan, Landon Slager, Alex Turcott, and Trevor Zegras. There's a couple more recognisable names, especially towards the bottom of that list. You got Caulfield, you got Brett Berard, you've got Turcott, you've got Zegras, which are a lot of them relatively high draft picks, but I think it's fair to say this year, the USA might struggle a little bit more compared to other years if we're going based on their roster on paper. Would you agree, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing I said. I said much like Canada. The States they've got a lot of draft picks in there. They've got quite a bit of experience. But a lot of the players are applying their trade in the NCAA at the moment.
Yes.
So it's more kind of, I'm not saying the university teams aren't as strong, but you know what I mean? They're not as, if you compare it to Canada, where they're all in the WHL and they're all in the affiliate teams to the NHL.
Yeah.
A lot of the States teams are playing in the NCAA. I also commented as well, they do perhaps often struggle in the one-off games. They get eliminated in the quarterfinal stages, probably more than you would expect. They have been eliminated quite a bit over the last decade or so in the quarterfinal stage, but they have got a medal in 4 of the last 5 years. And even though they potentially look a bit weaker on paper, States are a team you can never rule them out.
Oh, absolutely not.
And as I said, medals in 4 of the last 5 years. They always have the potential to go deep. I haven't got them going all the way, but I will obviously go through with what my tuppence worth at the end when we've gone through all the rosters.
Sure, absolutely. I think also it's an interesting point you mentioned the NCAA is a big factor. I would imagine with the Canadian team, because there was only one draft-eligible player in that, and it was one of the goaltenders, I believe you said.
Yeah.
All of these players have been picked. They weren't likely to go back to the OHL. The OHL isn't playing this year, so it's kind of like, we know we've got some very, very highly touted prospects here. We can just shove them in. Whereas with the USA roster, I would imagine, because the NCAA is pretty much the only junior league, if you want to call it junior league, that's playing in North America at the moment. The WHL, the OHL, the QMJHL is playing, but there aren't many players on this roster from the Q. There's no players from the Q, to be exact. So I would imagine maybe because the NCAA is one of the only rosters only rosters active at the moment, or only leagues active at the moment, they've decided, you know what, we need to, get the players that have actually got into a bit of game shape at the moment and kind of prioritize that, which, that's not a dumb decision, whether it be it be a player that's maybe less recognizable than some of the others, but sometimes you just got to go with the hot hand. So let's move on. You go.
I was going to say, thinking of America and Canada, I've got a point I wanted to note down because I don't want to risk missing it. Every single NHL team has a draft pick going to these championships except St. Louis.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. And obviously that's also including a lot of the European teams as well. So there's going to be such a bevy of, highly touted prospects. Now, like we mentioned last week, not all of those prospects will pan out. For some of them, this might be the high point of their hockey career. And let's hope that it's a good tournament for them. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing it. I hope Free Sports or Premier Sports show some of the games. That'd be a lot of fun. Whether they do or not, I don't know, but I'll try and find somewhere to watch it. All right, so let's look at Finland next, shall we? Let's look at the Finnish team taking part. So we have Joel Blomqvist, Kari Pirinen, I'm not going to try and pronounce all of these names, and Rup Tapanen as the goaltenders. The defensive core, there isn't anybody specifically that I recognise as like, oh, they're a highly touted name. Go for it.
Every player... Are we on Austria, yeah?
No, we're on Finland.
Oh, sorry, Finland. Sorry,
yeah,
my
Finland.
bad. I was looking up the Free Sports schedule for you.
No worries.
So every player is in the Liga, apart from the netminders who are all playing the Mestis.
Yes.
The biggest name to look at, their captain, Anton Lundell, went 12th overall to the Florida Panthers this year. Roby Jarventi went early in the second round to the Senators, and Joel Blomqvist, the netminder, went to Pittsburgh. Ronnie Hirvonen went to Toronto, all in the second round as well. Finland, they've had success in the past. They've won the tournament on a couple of occasions, and a couple of years ago, the most recently. But they're very much a team that relies on having a strong kind of draft class that year. 1 year, they win the tournament. Next year, they're in the relegation games. Then they might get knocked out in the quarterfinals. Then they go into the final again. Then they're back in the relegation games. So it does keep flicking a bit. Looking at their group kind of stages and having a look at it, I don't doubt they'll qualify. I think they're going to have a bit too much for the likes of Slovakia and Germany. Mm-hmm. But as I said, I'll go into group placings later on.
Absolutely. Also interesting to mention Vil. It's Vil Heinola, something like that, the defenseman. He's a Winnipeg Jets draft pick, I believe, and I believe he had some time in the NHL last season. I think he's playing in the Liga until the NHL season gets underway, so they've obviously got some decent players. And the one I really want to point out, actually, is Brad Lambert, who was born in Lahti, Finland, 16 years old. He's the youngest player on the roster to make the team, number 33. He's a centre, and he's actually a Finnish-Canadian dual national. So he decided, you know what, I might not get into the Canadian team, or I might not be up there with the Canadians. Let's go to my homeland. Let's go and play for Finland. And you never know, he might get a good chance there. So he's not been drafted yet.
Yeah,
but
I mean, he's 2022 draft eligible as well. So he's not even eligible next year.
Exactly. So I would imagine he's trying to get his draft stock up a little bit, get a bit of experience at one of the best tournaments in the world, and see how it goes there. So I would say there's a little bit more maybe equal name recognition, if not somewhat less, with the Finnish team compared to the American team. But once again, that doesn't necessarily mean just because they have a load of highly touted names doesn't mean they're not a good team. I would imagine the Finnish team are going to do just fine like they always do. Interestingly, though, important to mention, former second overall draft pick Capo Kakko of the New York Rangers isn't attending, although he is still eligible because he's only 19 years old. But he decided, no, I'm getting ready for the NHL season. And as a Rangers fan myself, I'm happy with that. But I would imagine a lot of Finnish fans aren't happy, given the fact that Alexei Lafreniere also said no or isn't going, and Canada are kind of furious at him for doing so. Let's look at Germany next, if we can. This is just the order that I've got all the tabs on Elite Prospects here.
Yeah, that's fine.
So with Germany, I would say much less so compared to some of the other teams we looked at. Not as much name recognition. Obviously, the big one is Tim Stützle, the 18-year-old recently drafted second overall, or was it third overall, sorry, in the most recent draft by the Ottawa Senators. I mean, you've got guys like Samuel Dubé, which is a name I recognise. I can't quite remember from where, though. But they're very much going to be a team that, if you guys remember the recent World Cup of Hockey, I say recent, it was in 2016, I believe. Team Europe, nobody really expected much of them, but they managed to make it through to the final. It's kind of a lot of these European teams, especially like Austria, Slovakia, Germany, they're going to rely on the fact that they are the underdog and they play a good, strong team game to help get them through. So, Chris, what do you want to mention about Team Germany?
Yeah, I was going to say they're a very young side. Everyone eligible next year.
Right.
You've got two in, so you've got Tim Stützle, but of course he's got that doubt surrounding his injury.
Yes.
And then you've got John Jason Peterka for the Buffalo Sabres. So he's in there as well. Now, Germany, they were only promoted to the World Junior Championships a couple of years ago. 2 years ago, they got promoted. Last year, they only survived beating Kazakhstan in the relegation games.
Oh, okay.
So they could easily be in for another tough year. Now, the thing to note about last year is they were in very much what I'm going to call the group of death.
Yes.
They were in their group, had Canada, USA, and Russia in it.
Oh, jeez.
So it's always going to be difficult for them. They did beat the Czech Republic. But then even this year, they've got Canada, Finland, and Switzerland. I reckon it could easily come down to that game against Slovakia. Now, if they do get through, it is likely to be as the fourth place side. Then they're going to come up against the winner of Group B, which is going to be USA, Sweden, or Russia, really. So I think even if they get into the quarterfinals, getting past the quarterfinals could really be a tough ask for Germany. But I think they are, not lucky is probably the wrong word, but I think they may be quite thankful of the fact that there's no relegation this year.
Absolutely. And I think also they're one of the better teams compared to some of the others that are sitting there as the kind of, for want of a better term, the weaker European countries. Obviously, like, we've got Slovakia, Austria, you know.
Oh, like, you just wait till I get onto Austria. I've got so many stats for them.
Oh, exactly. So let's move on to Slovakia. Now, which I'd say are pretty much on the same kind of level as Germany in terms of the kind of roster that they're putting together. I will be perfectly honest. I'll be the very first to say I do not recognise any names on this roster.
Okay, so
go for it.
I'll jump in then. So they've got, really, the name you want to look out for is Martin Kromiak of the LA Kings.
Okay.
Currently, obviously, was in with the OHL, but they haven't started. Again, other than that, they're all young. Then there's not a lot of top league experience in there. A lot of them are playing in Slovakia. It's not one of the high caliber leagues in Europe. Again, as I've mentioned with a couple of other teams, you're kind of looking at perhaps a mini series between themselves, Germany and Switzerland.
Yeah.
They have managed to get out of the group in fourth place in each of the last 5 years, and then they get knocked out because they come up against the other group winner. Again, you're relying, as I've mentioned before, they come up in the same group as like a team like Kazakhstan or Germany before, and they have got the caliber to beat them and get out of the group stages. But considering that 4 out of the 5 teams do get out the group, that's about all you can say for Slovakia, really. Pretty
much. And also important to mention, they've got quite a young defensive core coming to the tournament this year. They've got 2 17-year-olds and a 16-year-old. And also, they're the only team so far that we've looked at that has 4 different netminders going to the tournament. Have 2 16-year-olds on their team. They've got 1 forward and 1 defenseman. So whether they'll be the kind of players that we might see them taking in the first round of the NHL entry draft in a couple of years to come, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But, you know,
they do have to cut 4 players from that roster before the championship starts. So losing a netminder may well be what they do.
Yeah, and probably some of the younger players as well once they've got a practice
Perhaps,
or two underway. Yeah, so
but it's slightly more kind of because they obviously everybody is gone and they are kind of doing because they have all travelled now on the NHL website. They've all travelled, so you're coming over there to then not play. They're just going to get scratched and just watch for a few weeks, I suppose.
Well, they might get to take part in practices, I would imagine. Which means,
true,
I mean, like, especially for the 16, 17-year-olds getting the chance to practice with the best players in their country, it does a world of good for these players.
Very true. Very true.
So let's look at Switzerland next, the under-20 team for Switzerland. I'm just going to bring up, here we go. So they're very much, once again, rolling with a 3-goaltender system. I would imagine their team is pretty much what you would expect from them. I will be perfectly honest, once again, I don't necessarily recognise any of the names, but I have a feeling there's a couple of former draft picks here.
I mean, there's no draft picks in this squad in the sense that Switzerland didn't have draft picks this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough.
So I can understand why you don't spot anybody. In fact, every single person in the Switzerland squad is eligible for the draft next year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is so they are, really on the younger side, which is why you're not going to spot many of them. Noah Patenord playing in the QMJHL, but other than that, you're struggling for top flight experience again. Again, as I said, I think it's going to come down to a bit of a mini series. Germany and Slovakia. It will be close. I mean, what I put in my notes here, it will be close between these sides, and I don't really know which way to call it. So my predictions later might be quite wrong. Is the sentence I've put at the end of Switzerland. So
fair enough. Interestingly, though, there's no players playing in the National League A as far as I'm aware. So there's no real player that you're like, oh, like he's like the top player for their team, the MVP. There's some players playing in the NL, which I would imagine is the National League B at least. But no players necessarily playing in the National League A. I might be wrong on that, so don't quote me on it. But yeah, once again, another team that usually, obviously in the last couple of years, we've had guys like Nico Hischier come through. We've had some other players come through that have gone on to have or started to have very strong careers in the NHL. But there's not so much that star power this year for Switzerland, and that could end up hurting them, like Chris mentioned. Chris, let's get them out the way then. Austria, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's get them out the way. So
Austria, the person you'll notice is Marco Rossi.
Absolutely, yep.
The draft pick from this year. You 9th in the draft this year to the Minnesota Wild. Now, what I've said here is a team that perhaps nobody's really sure what to make of them. They only got promoted from Division 1A last year, and before that, they were last in the Junior Championships a decade ago. Now,
okay.
Their form in the competition is not great. They lost all 7 of their matches last time out, conceding 46 goals and scoring only 14. That's an average score of losing 7-2.
Oh, yikes.
And the time before that, in 2003, 2004, which was the last time they were in the championship, 5 losses and a tie. They've never won a World Junior Championship game. However, given that in 2003, 2004, this group of players were anywhere between 3 years old and not even born, and they weren't out of primary school in 2009, 2010, you can't necessarily assume they're going to struggle again. Again, that being said, though, predominantly the players are playing in the Alps Hockey League, which is not a particularly strong league. No. You look at their netminders, you've got Jakob Brander, who's in the Finnish 3rd division, and Leonard Sommer, who's in the Austrian 2nd division. So they are really kind of struggling. There are a few players. You've got a defenseman in Boston Junior Bruins, but again, they're all eligible kind of next year. So unlike Canada and America, who have stacked their rosters with draft picks, and Sweden as well, other than Marco Rossi at the Minnesota Wild. Again, I'm struggling to see Austria really performing too well at this championships.
I would very much imagine that the game plan for any other team that's going up against them is if we shut down Marco Rossi, we can win the game. If we can't, then at least it will be somewhat competitive. And if he manages to turn up the heat, then they might be able to come away with a win. So, Austria, the cards are stacked against them, let's be perfectly honest. Then the next team, we've got a couple more to go now. We've got the Czech Republic up next. There's a couple of players here. Do I recognise anybody specifically? Not necessarily.
So the highest draft pick this year, Jan Mysak, 48th overall to the Montreal Canadiens.
Okay, yeah, I recognise him.
Yeah, the recent form again for the Czech Republic suggests they get out the group stage and then lose in the quarterfinals. That tends to be what has been happening with them. Again, it's with the Czech Republic. See, they have a decent strength side. I don't think we can doubt that. The problem is that when you get into the quarterfinals and you're talking, the chances are, unless you're one of the top 2 in your group, you're coming up against somebody that's stronger than you.
Yeah.
And when you consider that you're going to be coming up against a Canada, USA, Russia, Sweden, Czech Republic, yeah, they're a good side, but they're not up there in what you could consider like the top 4.
They're a step below on the ladder. Let's be honest, they're a step below on the ladder. I think
that's why they struggle to get out of the quarterfinals a lot. They have had players that have been drafted. But then again, you've also got players that aren't draft eligible until 2022. So there's quite a mix in there. I think, again, they're going to get out of the group, I think, but they may struggle. I can't even remember what I put. I've tried to predict the whole tournament. So, yeah, we'll have to see, really.
I think the interesting thing, though, to the Czech Republic side's credit is a lot of them are playing in their first tier league, which is good to see. We've got, I would say, about half the roster is playing in the Czech Extraliga, the Czech League 1 this year, which is, that could, sure, that might be like, oh, well, that means then the quality of the Czech Extraliga isn't as good as some of the other leagues across Europe, but the fact that you are getting 17, 18, 19-year-olds getting potentially regular ice time in the top flight country in their nation, like, that's helpful. It's good to help those players develop, and hopefully their games against some of these other really highly touted teams will help them even more. So that's the Czech Republic. Penultimately, let's look at Sweden, shall we, Chris? And we can leave the other big hitter in Russia.
Kings
to the
of
end.
the group stage.
Really? Okay. Do tell us more.
So Sweden, I've just got to find them on my list here. So Sweden, again, they've got a lot of kind of SHL experience, a lot of draft picks in there as well. Most obviously, 4th overall pick, Lucas Raymond, 7th overall pick, Alexander Holtz.
Yep.
Those are the 2 teams that could be in there. Easily considered as the best European side alongside Russia, I think.
Yep.
In my opinion, one of the top 4, as I've just mentioned, usually have no problem getting out of the group.
Yes.
They have not lost a group game in their last 51 group games.
Wow, really?
The last group stage loss was on New Year's Eve 2006 to the United States.
Wow.
They have not lost a group in, 14 years.
Wow.
So definitely a side to look out for and expect them to contest a medal, probably a gold one.
Absolutely. So they haven't lost the group, or they haven't lost a game in the group?
No, they haven't lost a group game.
Well, there you go, Sweden.
They might have lost in the playoffs or something, but they haven't lost a group game since 2006.
Wow, so they're basically the Washington Capitals before they won their Stanley Cup in 2018. They were really good in the regular season, but then when the medals come, they usually not do very well.
That sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, pretty, wow. I mean, fair play to Sweden then. I would say, would you say that their team is slightly weaker than some of recent years past? Because there's been a lot of good players that have played for Sweden. No criticism to the roster that's here at the moment, but would you say there's as much star power necessarily compared to years past?
I mean, there's plenty of high draft picks in there, and I think the reason I've tipped Sweden to kind of do quite well is that a lot of their players are in the SHL.
Yeah.
And obviously every kind of league kind of plays a certain way. So all the players coming in are playing in the SHL way, or a lot of them.
Yeah.
Where if you compare that to America in the NCAA, obviously each kind of university is going to have its own style. It's much more varied than the SHL is. So the reason I've kind of put Sweden so high is I think they're going to gel much easier than perhaps America are, because they were kind of all playing a very similar style before they came into this.
Yes.
Whereas America might not have been, for example. So that's one of the reasons I've tipped to tipped Sweden so highly. And of course, we've only got Russia left after this.
Yeah, brilliant segue. Here we go. Here's Russia, ladies and gentlemen. So, the Russian team, I would expect this team to do very, 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 very well. They're pretty much, I could very much see Russia, Canada in the final, to be perfectly honest. And I think a big reason for that is the fact that their starting netminder is most likely to be Yaroslav Askarov, the 18-year-old netminder, the only first-round pick during this most recent draft as a goaltender. And yeah, I've watched a fair few number of St. Petersburg highlights with SKA. He's the real deal, folks. Like he is a solid player. You've obviously got several other former first round picks, whether it be from this year. I mean, you've got Muk Mahadulin. Was he a first round pick or was he a second round pick? I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was close enough to the fact that he's a New Jersey Devils pick, as far as I'm aware. Then you've got obviously guys like Vasily Podkolzin, the Vancouver Canucks draft pick from a couple of years ago. You've got Rodion Amarov, obviously a pick from this most recent year. Mikhail Abramov of the Ottawa Senators, I want to say. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. But yeah, this team is looking pretty good. I think Askarov could steal the gold medal from Canada if he really needed to. I think he's that good of a netminder that if the team in front of him plays well enough, and he's been playing very well against like some of the best players in the world all year to start the season, I would not be surprised if Askarov ended up helping Russia get gold. What are your thoughts, Chris?
I'm similar to you, but I haven't quite gotten that far. But
okay,
yeah, so a really strong side, as you've mentioned, either drafted or next year draft eligible. A lot of KHL experience, probably about half the side in the KHL, a few in the VHL, rest are in the junior system in the States, NCAA, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned, a team that includes Askarov. I mean, they're building the team around him.
Yes.
Highest netminder taken in the draft, number 11, a solid shot stopper between the pipes. An interesting note on the Russia side, according to Elite Prospects anyway, which I think is that the screen you've got up?
Yes, absolutely.
Every skater shoots left apart from one.
Yeah, no, that's a good. Yeah, Igor Spiridonov is the only one. Interesting.
Yeah. So there's that. I think they're in the tougher group out of the two because they've got USA and Sweden.
True.
But there's no doubt. I think that they will get out of that group. And I think as long as they avoid Canada in the quarterfinals, which again I think they will, I think they've got a good chance at a medal.
For sure. I think, obviously, you need to have a good goaltender if you want to win tournaments like this. And I know I've been raving about Askarov pretty much since we started talking about Russia, but the amount of highlights I've seen from him playing with SK St. Petersburg, and yeah, you can make your argument about the KHL. Yeah, there's not the best amount of parity between the teams, but he's a highlight reel machine, this guy. And you've also got guys like Podkolzin. Podkolzin's a guy that he hasn't really had a very good year this year. He's been kind of healthy scratched from St. Petersburg also quite a lot this year. You've got guys like Amarov that started off the year quite well, but a guy like Podkolzin, he's the captain of the team. If he has a good tournament, that will bring back his confidence and he could finish off the year quite strong. So, you know, he could use this as a real opportunity to kind of get back on the wagon here and kind of get things going. So we've looked at every single team. I've brought back up now the predictions. Chris, I haven't made any predictions here. So take us through what your predictions are, and then we'll see where to go from there.
Again, this has been based on my research for this piece, what I've been looking at in the stats, basically based on no knowledge whatsoever.
Yeah.
So Group A, I've got Canada topping Group A, and then Finland, Switzerland, Germany in fourth, Slovakia in fifth. That's what I've kind of gone with. And then in Group B, I've got Sweden topping the group, Russia second, USA third, Czech Republic fourth, and Austria fifth.
Okay.
That gives us the quarterfinals of Canada against the Czech Republic, Finland against the USA, Russia against Switzerland, and Sweden against Germany.
Okay.
So I've got Canada beating the Czech Republic. I've actually gone for Finland beating America, Russia beating Switzerland, and Sweden beating Germany.
Okay.
Then in the semi-finals, again, it depends on the ranking, so I'm not 100% sure. But it would be Canada against Finland or Russia, and then Finland or Russia against Sweden.
Okay.
I've got Canada and Sweden going to the gold medal game, and then Russia against Finland in the bronze medal game. I've got Russia taking bronze, and then I wasn't sure between Sweden and Canada. I thought it was going to be a really good game, hard to call. But then I went, well, this is the Euro podcast. I want the Europeans to win it. So I've gone Sweden gold, Canada silver, Russia bronze.
Okay, fair enough. So a little bit of bias there to the Europeans, but, you know, I've got to be perfectly honest. If I was going to pick 2 finalists from this, Canada, I think, is going to be there because their roster is stacked. I think it will be a real disappointment for Canadian fans if they don't make it because their roster is, like, especially compared to the other rosters in the tournament, I think it's either going to be Canada v Sweden or Canada v Russia, depending on how the stuff matches up. So very similar thought process to you. The US might surprise a lot of people. I mean, like you said about 10 minutes ago, you can never really count them out until they count themselves out. So I could see kind of the best 4 teams in the tournament are kind of, they're the obvious choices, but given the rosters that they've got, given their recent performance, I think it's going to go Canada. So having Canada, Sweden, Russia, and the US as kind of the better teams compared to the other ones. Well, what do you think?
A lot of it depends, I think, on how the groups go.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is because if Russia, for example, top the group and like beat Sweden, then they avoid Canada until the final, in which case I agree with you that it's probably going to be a Canada-Russia final.
Yeah.
Whereas if Russia comes second, it does depend a lot on, like, particularly on my looking anyway, how Russia and Finland go in the group stages, because if Finland get a slightly better group record than Russia face Canada in the semi-final.
Right, okay.
So it does depend a lot on how those group stages finish, I think. And a lot of, it sounds obvious, but I think a lot of, based on what we're saying, who's going to be in the final, depends a lot on how the group stages go, because that affects the semi-final pairings.
Yes, which is very, very obvious and very self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But, you know, with the stacked teams that we've got in this tournament, I really hope there is a way to watch it here in the UK, because, you know, this will be something nice to watch over Christmas, just a couple of World Junior tournament games, and kind of late at night when there's not really much else to do and you're kind of filled with Christmas dinner and you just want to watch some teenagers battle it out for a couple of points in the group stage. I'll take it, I'll take it. So that was an overview, a look at the World Junior Championships coming up. Obviously, our next episode, when it gets released, I would imagine the championships will be finished, so we can do a bit of a recap of the entire tournament. I think that'd be fun to do, especially because a lot of the leagues aren't necessarily playing. Maybe we could focus next episode on the World Junior Championships specifically, because, a lot of the leagues, like Chris mentioned earlier, they're going on big Christmas breaks and they're not going to be playing until certain times. So maybe we won't come back to the normal stuff until like our second episode back or something like that. But yeah, that was a look at the World Junior Championships. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. So I think this is a really good place to end today's episode, Chris. I will just mention once more to everybody listening, whether it be the video podcast or the audio version, we're not going to be here the next couple of weeks. We might have a little something for you over the time being, but essentially assume that we're not going to be releasing much content over the next 2 weeks. We've got a couple of bonus clips to go out in the days before Christmas, but after that, expect us to be gone for about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, something like that, because we don't have to release any episodes on the network. I've got to be honest, I really want to spend some time with my family this holiday season, especially with the...
If we're allowed,
especially given the interesting situation that has been the year 2020. So obviously it's gonna be a bit of a unique year this year. We will be back in early to mid-January. Don't you worry, folks. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be back and better than ever, hopefully. Well, I'm not going to guarantee that because, it's us. But at the same time, we are going to be back talking European hockey and having a little chat with you guys about all the interesting things that you need to know. We'll keep doing predictions and the scores and the standings. And obviously, as the months roll on, we'll be getting into the playoffs within Europe. So we'll be able to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, on that note, I think this is a perfect place to end today's episode. I want to wish happy Christmas, happy Hanukkah, happy holidays, happy festive time of the year, whatever it is you celebrate.
Whatever you're celebrating.
Exactly. Whatever it is, we don't mind. We hope you have a lovely time with your loved ones and your family, and stay safe and everything like that. Make sure you look after the people that you love, and we'll see you in a few weeks. So if you want to keep updated on all things Europuck podcast, or send us your thoughts, opinions, or questions, either for today's show or for our next show, if you want to talk to us about the World Junior Championships as it's going on, then do let us know at Europuck podcast. It's down there. at Europuck Podcast, or on Instagram, Europuck Podcast also. Basically both the same handles. And if you enjoyed listening to either or both of your hosts today, which I really hope you do because we've been talking for quite a while, then you can follow myself on Twitter, OddmanRushYT, or Chris at Chris_Gadsby. Thanks again for listening, guys, and we'll see you again next time. Have a good one, folks.